Good afternoon, Friday. This JSV is held in the context of the referendum and also within the context of our last JSV in the face of third parliament, the second last parliamentary election for the Autonomous Bougainville Government. And so a very important milestone JSV. One, certainly headline outcome of this conversation that we've had in JSV is that this possibly is the last JSV we will have. And we are now progressing entitling this sort of meeting as a joint supervisory body meeting. We're now advancing it to a joint consultation or consultative meeting between both governments as we move past referendum, giving respect to the Bougainvilleans message. Over 98% who voted for independence, giving that respect they deserve. We're moving to consultation arrangement in which this body of leaders will sit through and we will work through issues that embraces the desire for the island for self-determination, as well as embrace contemporary demands for the greater PNG, especially within the constitutional department of Papua New Guinea, to remain a united nation. But this JSV that we concluded, historically the last JSV that we concluded, was an open, honest, frank discussion between both sides. On behalf of the national government, I made apologies for inconsistency, ambiguity, a lack of clarity, a lack of delivery and commitment that we've made since 2001 to the people of Bougainville after today. But what greater level of commitment can national government show than to support the cause to ensure the referendum is conducted? And obviously, in my view, is the greatest culmination of people of Bougainville to have an expressed democratic way of expressing their desire. And national government has shown commitment to allow for. Now, as part of the agenda in this last JSV that we had, include discussion on post-referendum intergovernment consultations, discussions on ratification and expressly to establish what is the fullest meaning of ratification, because that is essentially one of the core items that is left standing unfulfilled as we speak. And so that definition will be clearly defined between legal teams on both sides that we've established. We also focus on discussing on what I term as economic independent drive, not necessarily only for the rest of PNG, but more importantly in the context of resuscitating Bougainville economy. How we should have an economic and investment summit that will shift towards ensuring Bougainvilleans receive correct foreign investment as well as the domestic investments we're growing. We also talk about fully transfer BCL sales. I made policy pronouncement. This JSV affirmed that the entire shares of Bougainville Copper they passed to Bougainville Mining Limited, Bougainville Government and Bougainville People's subsidiary company. And that includes 17% share that earlier cabinet in 2017 under Prime Minister O'Neill then passed quarantine for BCL landowners, as I said. We also clearly and made clear that the West-Western Development 1, which is a consistent grant, especially quarantine, not to be passed with condition, but to be given to support the budget on the ground on Bougainville. We also made indication that we will make clarity the 100 million kina per year commitment we've made on Bougainville on 13th of September 2019 when I addressed the Bougainville Parliament. But we also made undertaking to come back to establish a clear strategy, raising the 100 million kina per year commitment going forward, as well as including the outstanding 631 million kina outstanding RDG that we've established last year. We also looked at giving commitments of funds. We made commitment of funds to ensure that 2020 general elections in Bougainville is conducted. And this is a part of our agenda. Today we received a report on the progress on weapons disposal. Weapons disposal work has been concluded, and this JSV established that any prevalence of weapon on the ground today will be termed as a law and order issue and defined as a law and order issue after this process is complete. Then we also discussed fully on transfer of balance of powers we still hold in Guinea. And I uttered my absolute dismay in the slowness of Guinea to completely detach or devolve powers that we still hold on to. When I arrived in Arawa on the 13th of December 2019, I made a pronouncement that every power Guinea holds will be given except foreign affairs, defense, and the issues of boundary and currency and all these foreign affairs related matters. And so this JSB again made with no reservation full commitment that ministers on both sides will now see the will change, that ministers from Guinea will transfer every subsidiary act of parliament functions to Bougainville so that they can have their own governing acts of parliament that they operate within. The only relationship between Guinea and Bougainville will be a relationship to the mother constitution. Every enabling act of parliament, per se congruent to running better government on the ground, must be fully transferred to the Bougainville government. And that is within the context of people voting for independence. Whilst the independent issue is part of the process where we will now advance into as we consult each other, government on the ground must practice governing, running, passing law, administration, collecting revenue. We feel it is proper for them to exercise their rights, and Guinea is not in the interest of retaining powers here that necessarily can be exercised by government closest to where the people are, especially the people that express the intention for self-determination. And this includes powers like fisheries, taxation, and every other powers, including powerful powers like finance, keeping powers here, treasury, keeping powers here. All these things will be detached and transferred to them. And we have agreed that we will have the first JSB, a joint consultation meeting after the Bougainville government has been restored back into office and after the convenience of the assembly. Then we will reconvene to have our first JCB, and in the joint consultation supervisory body or meeting that we will have, we will then go towards a year's program of consultation and engagement, including establishing what is the definition of education, and to progress towards the next phase of programs as encapsulated under the 2001 Bougainville Peace Agreement. And so let me at this juncture thank President Momis for his leadership, Minister Punaha. I heard leading up to the referendum, our own Minister, National Minister Dr. Pugatemu and Minister Punaha, they both said vehicle, they said platform, and they spoke on what is referendum and the consequence of referendum and different votes. I think we've reached a level of maturity where we're openly discussing things, and it's no credit to only one person. I view that what is now evident, a growing level of maturity and trust between Buka and Guinea, between Bougainville and rest of PNG, is a result of people who are showing commitment and determination to work through issues by rallying the Melanesian ability of having consensus and discussions on the table, like our ancient chiefs and big men do. And we are rallying that traditional consensus ability we have as Melanesians. Going forward, let me give confidence to people of Bougainville and the rest of PNG that the views for self-determination, as well as greater PNG view to maintain a unified balance, we can find a sweet spot where everyone is satisfied. I know God of heaven will lead us into that space where Bougainvilleans' aspiration to ensure they advocate their own destiny is not abrogated or diluted, and PNG's intention to maintain sanctity of the Union is still given the strike, and this is something that we will move on into the next phase. It has been resolved that right after the elections we reconvene and we will go into advanced discussion in these matters instead of deferring it further and further. So let me give assurance to President Williams, we've heard you, and we will work right after the elections. But in the meantime, we will be transferring every powers to you so that you can exercise the benefits of running your own government and the harvest of your own resources. From PNG side, whatever we have, we don't have abundance. In the reality of many needs we have, the best we can do, whatever we can afford, we will give, and whatever we have fallen behind in not honoring, we will try absolutely best to catch up and to pass on to Bougainville so that our brothers and sisters in Bougainville are also given the due care they deserve. So with this note, thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you all the ministers who have assisted from the side of Bougainville, all the public servants from Bougainville, and from PNG Sepuka and all the public servants from ministers from leaders from the National Parliament, and our public servants in Wagani. We're looking forward to a fruitful outcome as we progress better discussions this year and in the next year that will come. Thank you, President Momis. Over to you, and I wish you all the very best as you go to the elections. The Bougainville people who will be going to the elections, as you conducted a very mature referendum election. We know that your coming election will be conducted in a spirit of maturity. The unity you saw during the referendum may be passed on to the next coming elections. Of course, in the context and power play of trying to justify authority, sometimes we have some stiff moments, but I encourage people of Bougainville, the whole world is watching you as you go to the next election. We encourage you to maintain the same unity and peace you had during the referendum into your next elections. Mr. President.
Thank you, Prime Minister. From the outset, I must express the thanks of the Bougainville government, the Bougainville team, comprising of ministers and House of Representatives, members, and our technical team. To you and to your team, Prime Minister, for a very good meeting we've just concluded. This KSB meeting has been an epoch-making event. I say this because for the first time we've heard a Prime Minister making a total commitment to adhere to the Bougainville Peace Agreement in terms of transferring those powers and functions to Bougainville, purely and simply. We have had a lot of problems because people did not trust the elected leaders of Bougainville, because they probably had other motives or other reasons why they wanted to sabotage the processes that the peace agreement stipulates. Peace agreement is a result of a lot of hard work by both the national government team and the Bougainville representatives, Bougainville leaders. It's a good agreement. It calls for collaborative engagement. It calls for mutual trust. It calls for peace, working for peace through peaceful means. And above all, it calls for honest, intellectual discussions between leaders. I have a lot of faith in elected representatives. As the PNG Constitution connotes, our Constitution is an autonomous Constitution that says clearly that power belongs to the people of Papua New Guinea. And it is the people, through the electoral process, that mandate their elected leaders. It is the elected representatives who should call the terms of discussions as they see them to be compliant with the basic aspirations and real needs of their people. The bureaucrats are there to provide technical advice and support. However, for a long time, I think we have been confusing our roles. For the first time under your leadership, Prime Minister, we have experienced that you have a heart, a pure heart, and you listen to what we say, and you consult with us in the spirit of mutual trust. And that is why the consultations that we have had so far will lead to great success in the future. The transfer, the commitment you made to transfer all powers, not new powers, powers that belong to us in any case under the peace agreement, is a concrete step to empower the people of Bougainville. Whether we are independent or not, people who are not empowered are dependent. And if people are dependent, they are vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. And that applies to all of us in PNG, not only to Bougainville. A highly centralized and bureaucratized government is not good for Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea is a highly diverse country in terms of languages, customs, even religion, populace, all kinds of things. You need a government that believes in empowering people through decentralization of powers. And I think you have, this is the second time you have made this commitment, but this time it's absolute. You have made it very, very clear, you and your team, Sepuka Temu and your ministers and your advisors, that you are in business to ensure that the consultations that will happen between the two governments, between the two teams, over the result of the referendum will take place, and therefore it will be fair and legitimate, and I believe the result will be mutually acceptable. Because as long as we have participatory democracy, as long as people participate in the processes of development and decision making, they will be highly motivated to accept responsibility for anything. So today I think, Prime Minister, perhaps we did not realize this epoch-making event we just concluded. For the first time, if the national government really carries out and transfers the powers to us, there will be a major, major change in the people of Bougainville becoming the subjects of development. They will not be just dependent on handouts from the national government. I think that has been the problem for a long time. I read in the newspaper that the Bougainville government is corrupt, and I think that is totally nonsensical. I challenge those people who make those statements. When the Bougainville government has a weak public service that has no capacity, the police that has no capacity, it is difficult, and when we don't have the legitimate funding that is stipulated under the peace agreement for us to work with, it is difficult to operate things. But I think after this, I'm sure things will work out. I'm very happy that the new policies that we have entered into to enable us to increase our internal revenue will go a long way to make us more and more independent in terms of making our own decisions and determining our own priorities. For a long time, we had no ability to do that because of lack of funding, lack of institutional capacity, as well as personal capacity. So, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I think this has been a very good, successful meeting. And as the Prime Minister has said, this will be the last JSB meeting. The next meeting that will take place will be the joint or intergovernmental consultative team that will will actually take over the big responsibility of carrying out consultations, which are very, very important consultations will lead to determining exactly what will be the final thing that will go before the National Parliament to ratify. Consultations will lead us to discern exactly what are the real aspirations and needs of the people of Bougainville that will be pragmatically delivered under the circumstances in Papua New Guinea. So the people of Bougainville have made their wish or their will known. We cannot ignore that. But by the same token, we know that the national government, the Prime Minister and his team, have sworn to maintain national sovereignty. It is not easy for a government to deal with these two what might seem to be diametrically opposed, but through consultation, honest consultation, and allowing democratic participation of all the stakeholders, I think something good will come out of this. Don't know exactly what it is, but I believe, the heart of heart, my heart, that something very, very good will come out of it, and it will be hailed by the world as a great success. The Bougainville referendum was a great success, but what we are going to address from henceforth will be a much, much more difficult task, and if it is resolved in a democratic and an honest way, it will become a greater feat for Papua New Guinea to have achieved. So with those few words, I'm encouraged by our meeting today. I thank the Prime Minister and all his ministers, Sabuka Temu, who led the negotiations with his counterpart, Mr. Pungao, and all our Bougainville ministers. I think the affairs of Bougainville are in good hands, especially when we see that there will be collaborative engagement between the two parties to ensure that the necessary steps will be taken to achieve a peaceful outcome. Thank you, Prime Minister.